Okay, my first guest, honored to have him, the former Attorney General under President Obama, who's now chair of the National Democratic Redistricting Committee. Eric Holder, great to see you, Mr. Attorney General. Thanks for doing this.
Good to see
Uh,
you too, Bill.
well, one of the problems I find with the pandemic is that it's very hard to have a conversation, even with anybody else, with anybody about anything else. It's the only issue that people talk about, and I think we are losing sight of the fact we're 6 months from an election,
Right.
which I know you are trying to make sure comes out fair and square. Is that what your committee is all about, or is it a fancy way of saying gerrymandering?
Well, we want to try to combat what happened in 2011 when the Republicans really gerrymandered to a degree that we've not seen in recent memory. But we also focused on this presidential election and the elections more generally in November to try to make sure that everybody who wants to cast a ballot in November has the ability to do so and can do so in a safe way. Again, our focus is on gerrymandering, but we don't want to just fight for structures that we want to put in place and then have an election in November that doesn't go well, and that will scuttle all of the work that we're doing. So we've really kind of broadened what it is we are doing, fighting for a fair, safe election in November, as well as continue to concentrate on our anti-gerrymandering efforts.
So you think there is a scenario where that election does go well? Because I don't see any scenario where it does, because as I've been saying for years now, I don't think Trump, I cannot picture that man gracefully conceding and walking away. And I keep asking Democrats, you're probably the one with the most law enforcement experience I've ever asked this. What do you do if he says it was rigged, blah, 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 it's not safe for me to leave, whatever bullshit he's going to come up with, and refuses to leave? I want to know what the plan is.
Well, I think he will certainly say when he loses that it was rigged, that it was unfair. He'll come up with all kinds of reasons why he will cast doubt on the legitimacy of the election. And I'm really worried about what happens between November, his defeat, and when he actually leaves office in January. That, I think, is the period we should be focused on. He'll still have presidential power, and God only knows how he'll use it. On the day of the inauguration, I actually think that he will leave. And if he doesn't leave, the United States Marshal Service, the Metropolitan Police Department here in Washington, D.C., the Secret Service, all have the ability to pull him out of the White House, and
Oh,
we'll get on with the inauguration and the presidency of Joe Biden.
they have the ability. I don't, do they have the will? I mean, you mentioned the police department. Police love his dirty draws. You really think they're going to pull him out of the White House?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because I think people in law enforcement positions, people with the power to do those kinds of things, will really, as I always say, they'll check to the power, and the power will move on the inauguration day. And my guess would be that all the people, all the organizations that have that capacity, will do the right thing, the constitutional thing, and listen to the orders of the new president, and understand that there has been again a peaceful transition of power, regardless of what it is that Trump might want to do.
Okay, we'll color you more optimistic than I am. I don't see him that 2 months you're describing between the election and the inauguration day. He's just going to be ranting and raving, and his people are going to be in the streets. And okay, but we'll move on. So New York State canceled their primary. 16 states have postponed them. This is rather unprecedented. I wonder if you think this is a dangerous precedent. We Americans have voted through everything: Civil War, Spanish flu, Depression. Canceling an election, I think, is well, what do you think?
Well, I think postponing these elections makes sense to do them at a time when people are less vulnerable to the pandemic, coming up with alternative ways that people can cast a ballot. So we don't have a repeat of what we had in Wisconsin when people had to stand in line for extended periods of time to cast a vote. And we know now that in Wisconsin, at least 30 people have come down with the virus that can be directly traced to their having to stand in line. I'm sure that number is going to grow. But canceling, that's not something that I think we ought to do. Now, I understand that what happened in New York was they just simply canceled the primary with regard to the presidential primary. And there, with the result, we already know what it is. But the rest of what is supposed to occur on primary day in New York is, I understand it, going to continue to go on. So I would be not in favor of canceling things, but I do understand how there might be the need to postpone and then put in place alternative means so that people can vote safely.